27.1%. That is how many members of Gen Z owned a home in 2025. Just over 1 in 4. When baby boomers were the same age, the figure sat near 40%, an 8-point gap, and it continues to widen. By spring 2024, the typical new mortgage payment had reached $2,800 a month, an all-time high at the time. For the first generation in modern American history, the traditional path to homeownership did not simply become harder. For most, it effectively disappeared. Yet in 2025, a small shift occurred, a single percentage point increase. Not because prices fell, but because this generation began making compromises their parents never had to consider. This is the story of how the ladder to homeownership was first kicked away, and then the door locked behind it. Welcome inside the economy. To understand why this happened, we have to go back to 2008, the Great Recession, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Over 30 million jobs lost, $10 trillion in household wealth erased, millions of families lost their homes. Gen Z was still in elementary school, but they were watching. They saw stability vanish almost overnight. Millennials graduated directly into the wreckage. No jobs, crushing student debt, and a decade of stagnant wages. Median wealth for ages 35 to 44 fell 54% between 2007 and 2010, a lost decade. Gen X recovered. They were in their prime earning years and rebuilt. Boomers largely held on to their homes and their low-rate mortgages from the early 2000s, 3.5% versus today's 7%. Because so few were selling, inventory remains frozen at historic lows. What Gen Z inherited was not wealth or opportunity, it was engineered scarcity. After the crash, home builders did not just slow down, they were left scarred. Thousands of construction firms went bankrupt, and the survivors turned hyper-cautious. For the next 15 years, the US built far fewer homes than the growing population demanded. Home stats plummeted to levels not seen since the 1960s, despite double the population size. We entered the 2020s with a housing deficit estimated at 3.8 to 5 million units, a gap that has only widened across the years. Gen Z is not just battling high prices, they're competing for a supply that was never constructed. The basics of economics. What happens when demand is more than supply? And then came 2020. When the world stopped, the money kept moving. Interest rates plummeted to near zero. A massive wave of capital was unleashed. Much of it did not flow to families seeking healthcare. It flowed towards investors, the quantitative teams at large firms like Blackstone and others. They recognized a simple, powerful truth: you cannot print more land. While the public focused on the virus, institutional and investor capital began building a different kind of position. Between 2020 and 2025, the share of homes purchased by investors climbed from an average around 18% to peaks near 27 to 34% in various quarters and markets. They were not merely buying houses. In many cases, they were securing future supply. By 2024, the tone in the industry had quietly shifted. The conversation moved from buying to access. New models emerged: build-to-rent communities, fractional ownership experiments, subscription-style living, marketed with the sleek aesthetic of tech startups, but the underlying math was cold and rational. The scarcity created after 2008 had become an investment thesis after 2020. In 2025, that modest 1-point gain in Gen Z home ownership appeared. It was not a comeback, it was an adaptation under pressure. Redfin's economists described it plainly. Gen Z is compromising in ways earlier generations rarely did. They are 57% more likely than millennials to buy fixer-uppers, trading money they lack for labor they can provide. They are moving to more affordable metros: Rochester, Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Memphis, not necessarily where they want to live, but where entry is still possible. For many, family wealth is the deciding factor. Roughly 40% of first-time buyers under 30 receive direct financial help from relatives. Without it, the door often stays closed. Student debt continues to weigh heavily. Roughly 39% of Gen Z say their student loan debt delays homeownership. 22% of millennials cited it as the primary barrier. Only 3% of boomers ever did. After a long pause on collections that began in 2020, some involuntary actions resumed in 2025. But as of early 2026, wage garnishment for defaulted loans remains on hold. Still, the threat lingers. Up to 15% of paychecks could disappear if resumed. Add expiring healthcare subsidies, rising insurance, persistent inflation, and rents that consume what little remains. The new math is not just changing, it is punishing. The mindset itself has changed. For boomers, a home was romantic, the ultimate symbol of adulthood and a nest egg to retire on. For Gen Z, it is increasingly strategic. They prioritize function, energy efficiency, smart systems, and reliable high-speed connectivity. Remote work has given them geographic freedom. 40% delay buying because they anticipate moving again. Why anchor down? Yet 90% still say home ownership remains part of the American dream. The desire is intact. The pathway is obstructed. Many are redirecting capital into stocks, index funds, and even crypto, favoring liquidity and flexibility over locked-in equity. As Redfin's senior economist Shahryar Bokhari observed, there are other vehicles for building wealth that do not require a massive down payment. Renting, once considered a sign of failure, is now often viewed as pragmatism. But the question lingers, how much of that is genuine preference, and how much is quiet resignation? The American dream rested on a simple intergenerational promise. Each cohort would do better than the last. For the first time in modern history, that trajectory has stalled. Each generation now owns less at the same age than the one before it. Not because of laziness or entitlement, because wages have not kept pace with housing costs. In 1980, the median home cost about 3.5 times median income. By 2025, that ratio had climbed past 7 times. The 27% who do own homes are the exceptions, often aided by family support, dual high incomes, or significant personal sacrifices. The remaining 73% remain on the outside. 80% of Americans across generations now agree this is a genuine housing crisis. Structural, not personal. Gen Z has responded with resilience, creativity, and adaptation, locating windows where doors are locked. But resilience should not be the prerequisite for achieving what previous generations considered routine. Two crises, one that starved supply for more than a decade and another that supercharged demand and prices, have changed the game. The front door remains locked. The real question is whether we as a society will ever turn the key again, or continue forcing every generation to climb through windows.